I have been all along covering in this lockdown period is a subject of my choice, right? I would rather say this is like a cakewalk for me. I can just say the subject which I love to teach is constitutional law, none other than that the basic law of the country. Now, we have been traveling so far in constitution, many aspects, varied aspects of constitution. Now, today, the topic for discussion under Constitution of India will be on the focus of center-state relationship with reference to, in particular reference to the 7th schedule of the Constitution of India. So as I was very beginning, I was pointing out when I started this lecture series, while I was started with the preamble, even prior to preamble, I was just discussing about the structure of India as such. I was just discussing with. Is now visualized into a particular conceptual framework in one part of the constitution that has so been dedicated for dealing with the center and state relationship, which is the bedrock of the federal aspects or federal principles of the democracy. So ஏற்கனவே நம்ம பார்த்ததுதான். So India, we call it as neither a unitary nor a federal structure. It is a mixture. It's having a combined texture of a quasi-federal nature as such. So this particular aspect, federalism I'm talking about in the context with reference to Article 1 of the Constitution, to commence with India, the Bharat shall be the Union of States. So India, that is Bharat, shall be the Union of States. So this is the opening note of Constitution of India, which is now given a pragmatic vision into the text of the Constitution in one way under a particular part is devoted exclusively to deal with this relation, right? Union of States. So here comes, without the federation or concept of a combination of union of states, India as a country, as we all know, is not into existence. So now how the powers as such between the union and state is being distributed is the purpose or will be the topic for discussion, is the centrifugal point which we will be traveling through this entire series or the entire evening for discussion today. So the topic is framed in such a way that is center-state relationship under the Constitution, right? So something is hidden, a hidden mystery is there behind this particular topic. So when we say center and state relationship, is there some provision to govern as such in the Constitution? Now, even before going to the provisions as such, I will not be going through verbatim the provisions. We will be just touching on the administrative or the legislative or other more functions which will be on the constitutional platform, the premise of distribution of sharing of powers as such, right? அப்போ இந்திய அரசு அப்படிங்கிறது கூட்டாட்சியின் அடிப்படையில் செயல்பட்டு கொண்டு வருகின்ற ஒரு கட்டமைப்பை பெற்றுள்ளது. இந்த கூட்டாட்சி முறை செயல்பாட்டை விரிவாக எடுத்து உரைக்கும் விதமாக இந்திய அரசியலமைப்பு சட்டத்துல ஒரு குறிப்பிட்ட பகுதியை ஒதுக்கி அதற்கென தனியாக பிரத்யேகமாக ஒரு அட்டவணையே அதற்காக உருவாக்கப்பட்டுள்ளது, right? So now in the context of center state relation, what we are going to discuss is all about the 7th schedule. The mystery is now, the hidden mystery is thrown open. Now not we are going to talk about any other thing. The doctrines or the constitutional paradox is whatever is now in the premise of the center-state relations, which we will be going to travel further, will be restricted to such extent or to that extent of 7th schedule of the Constitution of India, right? Now we start with the very fundamental premise on the distribution of powers அப்ப சென்டர் சொல்லியாச்சு, ஸ்டேட் சொல்லியாச்சு. இது ரெண்டும் சேர்ந்தது தான் ஒரு ஃபெடரேஷன் ஆர் ஃபெடரல் காமிட்டி. இந்தியா இஸ் a federal committee சொல்லியாச்சு. It is a union of states. Federal or federation as such we mean to say it's a union of states. Now how union and state is being placed in a better pedestal in the constitutional law is the subject for discussion or concern today. Before going into that, now what is the method that is so been adopted by the Constitution of India in sharing these powers? So distribution of powers is nothing but I can put it in very simpler term, in a very finest term, is sharing of powers. மத்திய மாநில அரசுகளின் அதிகார பகிர்வை, அதிகார பங்கீட்டுகளை எடுத்துரைக்கும் செய்திகளை உள்ளடக்கியதுதான் இந்திய அரசியலமைப்பு சட்டத்தினுடைய 7வது அட்டவணை. So this is the key point of discussion for today, right? So now coming back to the method or the schematic distribution of powers as such, we start with the first power as we all would go, the law making power, the predominant function of the legislature. It is restricted particularly or confined only to the legislative authority. Now distribution of powers when it comes to legislative power or legislation or law making as such, when I would say, now what is the nature or extent of law making power with that of the center and that of the state, right? மத்திய மாநில அரசுகளினுடைய சட்டம் இயற்றும் அதிகாரங்களை, அப்ப பாராளுமன்றத்தினுடைய சட்டம் இயற்றும் அதிகாரம், அதற்கு கீழாக என்னது சட்டமன்றங்கள், மாநில சட்டமன்றங்களுடைய சட்டம் இயற்றும் அதிகாரமானது அதிகார பகிர்வு அல்லது பங்கீடு எவ்வாறு இந்திய அரசியலமைப்பு சட்டத்தில் எடுத்துரைக்கப்பட்டுள்ளதுங்கிறது விளக்குற விஷயம் தான் பார்த்தோம்னா 7வது அட்டவணையில் இருக்கு. Now, when we say distribution of powers, is there any specific allocation of powers as such? Yes. Constitution of India provides a particular methodology for distributing the powers. It is so being schematically, it is so being systematically envisaged in the Constitution. How it is done is the discussion for today. The method adopted by the Constitution for distribution of powers as to regulate the center-state relation is done in such a way that 7th schedule has primarily distributed the power or law-making powers or sharing of powers in that fashion by way of enlisting or categorizing those subject matters in form of 3 lists. So you all would know that there are 3 lists in the Constitution, namely in the 7th schedule, union list, state list and concurrent list. Even before going to this union list, state list, concurrent list, now we are going once again tracing this concept of sharing of powers or borrowing of this particular doctrine of sharing of powers or center state relation. எங்கு இருந்து இதற்கான அடிப்படை கட்டமைப்பு அல்லது இதற்கான அடிப்படையான சாரம்சம் பெறப்பட்டது அப்படின்னு பார்த்தோம்னா, this particular feature of sharing of powers by way of splitting into 3 different type of lists was a feature of the erstwhile British made law, namely the Government of India Act 1935. But when Britishers were there, Britishers were particular enough, keen enough to draft a particular piece of legislation. I say it is a Government of India Act 1935, a federal kind of a setup or a British made law which focuses on the comprehensive enumeration of distribution of powers or subjects. When I say distribution of powers, there are certain subjects which are so encapsulated and enlisted there under in these 3 lists. So the legislation or the legislative power of the center or state are conferred on the erstwhile Governor General, who was given power under the Government of India Act 1935. Was the discretion of the Governor General in lawmaking was exercised depending on the subject which has been so placed under the particular lists or any of these particular lists, right? So in the same way, when Constitution of India was drafted, the center-state relations or the provisions governing union-state relations were engulfed into the legislative sphere or the lawmaking functions as such, it is found place in one particular part. The part being part number 11 of the Constitution. Part number 11 of the Constitution starts with Article 245. It covers about 10 articles. So the subject for discussion today will be on these 10 articles. You can make it very, very clear. 10 or 11 articles. Right, part number 11, and also it comprises 11 articles. 11 articles, I say, starting from 245 up to Article 255. So these articles will be the framework of center-state relations as such. Right. Not only these articles, in particular context of these articles read with 7th schedule will be the core scheme, or it will constitute the core aspects of distribution of powers of center state, more so particularly defined as the legislative relations. So when we talk about legislative or lawmaking functions of the Constitution or lawmaking functions of the legislature, parliament or the state legislature as such, these are all the provisions which I say starting from part number 11, comprising of articles 245 to 255 in context of, in conjunction with the provisions of 7th schedule, the subject matter under 7th schedule. அப்போ இதுதான் வந்து மத்திய மாநில அரசுகளுடைய சட்டம் இயற்றும் அதிகார பகிர்வையும் மத்திய மாநில அரசுகளுடைய உறவை எவ்வாறெல்லாம் எடுத்து காமிக்கிறதுக்கான ஒரு அடிப்படை கட்டமைப்பு. சரி, coming to the very essence of the legal sovereignty, we used to say the lawmaking power, right? As Austinian subscribers of Austinian's view, we say law is the command of the sovereign, which flows from the political superior authority and down towards the politically inferior subjects. But now law making is the sovereign power of the state. Now the legislative powers between the center and state, or state and முதல்ல நான் சொன்ன ஸ்டேட்ங்கிறது அரசு, ரைட்? இப்போ சொல்றது மத்திய மாநில அரசுகள் உறவு. Don't get confused, right? Law making power is the predominant power of the state, right, or the government as such, I can say, right? But coming to the sharing of this legal sharing of the sovereign power of lawmaking, there is a demarcation with reference to the respective areas wherein the center and state could operate, or the center and state could distinguish or draw a thin line with regard to legislation or lawmaking. What is the reason for this kind of a demarcation as provided under the Constitution? The reason is nothing but this twofold in nature. But the first reason being, the distribution of power or demarcation of legislative powers helps in identifying and defining the specified boundaries or field within which the executive or the lawmakers usually act accordingly within their metes and bounds. Say, wherein the center alone has got the power, the subject matters fall within the domain of union list, where center alone can exclusively make a law. If it comes to state list, then state government alone are empowered to make such laws. Now coming to the residual power or residuary functions, namely the concurrent list, where the center as well the states are parallelly or simultaneously, side by side, they can make out a law. Powers are so being vested both either on the central government or the state government. So this is how a kind of a flexible nature of Indian Constitution could be evinced or witnessed, right? I say Indian Constitution is not so rigid, it is so flexible. Now the sharing of powers has also been a so flexible way, the structure being so flexible because center can enact laws as well the state can enact laws within their respective domains or spheres, right? In other case, in certain situation where the center as well the state can make laws. So now this will be discussed by me in the course of my lecture. So now the precise aspect of center-state relation as found in the Constitution, verbally whatever has been formulated in the Constitution, can be visualized. Number 2 will be 7th schedule per se does not deal only with the aspects of sharing of powers as such. It also the center and state can make laws. The topics as such. So center union list, state list, concurrent list. These three lists categorically contain certain items or subject matters to be dealt with. So only within that subject matters, these legislative bodies, namely the central government and the state government, are empowered to make a law and to enact a particular piece of legislation, confining themselves to the subject matter enlisted thereon, not beyond the scope of the subject matter. They can make laws. So I can put it in very simpler way, or in a very simpliciter, I can say the legislative sphere within which the respective government can make a law is categorically given under the 7th schedule. Right. Now coming to the epistemological genesis of center-state relations under the Constitution. After Constitution of India is being enacted, coming into force, there were a lot of situations wherein the states were depending on the center on number of occasions, right? Due to the political scenario, due to the political friction, there was no specified practical center-state relation which could be exhibited on the part of both state as well as center. So for which reason the government of India at that point of time during 1967, right, set up a commission called as the Administrative Reforms Commission, ARC, we call it as. In the year 1966, more particularly, right, the Administrative Reforms Commission was set up with the very fundamental understanding to deal with the subject autonomy of these devolution of powers on the states as well the center, right. அப்போ மத்திய மாநில அரசுகளுடைய உறவை சுமூகப்படுத்துவதற்காக வேண்டி 1966 நிர்வாக சீர்திருத்த குழு, Administrative Reforms Commission, was set up by the government of India. Now emphatically we all subscribe to India as a strong union. Now once again the Administrative Reforms Commission as well suggested for some autonomy of states. Tamil alaga solonuna manila suya aachi, right. So managing the state is also given some role, or they will be given an independent role in managing the affairs of the state within their respective domain in the context of lawmaking, etc. Right. This was the first step, a leapfrog development, I can say, a very small step ahead in center-state relations. Now moving on further, it was widened with a vibrant measure which was taken by the then government, which was in regime in Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu was the forerunner state, which I can say, right, without any opinion or without expressing anything further into the political aspects or no political views expressed by me here, don't take it otherwise. It was at that point of time the party which was in rule, namely the DMK government in 1971, in government, the Tamil Nadu, the state of Tamil Nadu, there was a committee set up, namely Rajamannar Committee. This Rajamannar Committee was set up by the then government for the purpose of center-state relations to regulate the state autonomy, as I was just pointing out. Followed by, this was the first move taken by all the state governments across the country. Tamil Nadu was the first state, we can proudly say. It was in 1971. The government of Tamil Nadu reflected the center-state ideology, the concept of ideology of center-state relation, emphasizing on the state autonomy, manila suyachi venum endu solli, right. A committee was appointed under the headship of Rajamannar. Rajamannar committee was the first committee to deal with the center-state relation. It was sometime later followed by the other states, where each and every state, namely West Bengal, Jammu and Kashmir, all other states, Bihar, they have started setting up committees in their respective states. More particularly, there was something, right, when it comes to the other center-state relation, one more commission is there, Sarkaria Commission, right. Center-state relation regulate pandradhula this, yes, Sarkaria Commission. Apart from the Rajamannar Commission, it was Sarkaria Commission, which went extensively into the study of the center-state relation, more particularly all the relation, legislative relation, administrative relation, fiscal or financial relation between the center and state. Right. This has given way for a major sea change in terms of regulating center-state relation as such. Now, just traveling further into the center-state relations, it is very, very essential to know now how Constitution of India has conferred powers on the or distribution, territorial distribution of powers between the center on one hand, state on the other. We were all along talking about these provisions. I was just telling about the commencing article, namely Article 245. All right. So now this is the first step for the territorial distribution of powers. As such, it is so being categorically given under Article 245 of the Constitution. Any questions, you can just type it out in the chat box. That will be answered duly in the course of the lecture, at the back end of the lecture. Right. So Article 245 is the first and foremost article, more particularly class 1 of Article 245. If you could able to see with the help of your bare text, which is available with you. Now it defines the categorical extent of the territorial jurisdiction. What is the extent of territorial jurisdiction of distribution of lawmaking? Now it more particularly talks about the lawmaking powers between the parliament and the state legislature as such, Article 245. Right. அப்ப பார்லிமெண்ட்டுக்கு எவ்வளவு அதிகாரம் இருக்கிறது, சட்டம் இயற்றும் அதிகாரத்தினுடைய அளவு என்ன, ரைட், அதனுடைய எல்லை என்ன, அதே போல் மாநில அரசுகளினுடைய எல்லை என்ன. ஸோ இது விரிவா சொல்லி இருக்கிற ஷரத்து அப்படின்னா இந்திய அரசியலமைப்பு சட்டத்தின் கீழ் ஷரத்து 245 கீழ் கொடுக்கப்பட்டுள்ளது. Right, you can just refer to Article 245. So the extent of lawmaking powers are laws made by the parliament, by the legislature and of the state legislature and that of the parliament. Right. So this is the first opening note of Article 245. Right. So it confers powers on the parliament and legislature, as we know. Now, whatever power that is conferred under by virtue of Article 245 on the parliament and the states, now it is so particularly provided with the very next article, the subject enumeration under Article 246. Power எப்படி எப்படிலாம் பிரிச்சுக்கணும்னு சொல்லி மட்டும் தான் 245 சொல்லுது. என்னென்ன ஐட்டம்ஸ் ஆர் என்னென்ன சப்ஜெக்ட் மேட்டர்ல பவர் டிஸ்ட்ரிபியூஷன் பண்ணிக்கலாம், வாட் இஸ் தி சப்ஜெக்ட்ஸ் தட் ஆர் enumerated, what are all the subject matter within the dominion or domain of center as well state அப்படிங்கிறது is being given under Article 245. Then 246, the next article 246 very particularly talks about the subject matter of laws made by parliament and by legislature. என்னென்ன இங்க தான் we find the opening word of union list, state list, concurrent list, இதெல்லாம் பார்க்கணும். Right, 7th scheduled reference இங்க தான் எடுத்துட்டு வராங்க. So exclusive lawmaking power is vested under these three lists அப்படிங்கிறது கேட்டகாரிகளா தெரியுது. 246 class 1 or subsection or class 1 of 246 talks about the sharing of subject matters enumerated within three lists, namely union, state and concurrent. Right. This also provides the limitation of lawmaking powers. அப்போ யூனியனுக்கு இவ்வளவுதான் பவர் இருக்கு, இந்த சப்ஜெக்ட் மேட்டர் தான் பவர் இருக்கு, ஸ்டேட்டுக்கு இந்த சப்ஜெக்ட் மேட்டர்ஸ் மட்டும்தான், then concurrent list க்கு both state as well center அப்படிங்கறத it is so being particular or caught, it is been camouflaged under Article 246. Right. This 246 was included into the Constitution with the purpose of or with the very reason of sharing of powers, I can say. So 245 ல கொடுத்திருக்க law making power இங்க எப்படி derive பண்ணிக்கறாங்கற சொல்ற ஆர்டிகல் தான் 246. அப்ப 246 defines the respective jurisdiction between union and states or the topics of legislation with reference to the three lists. 245 talks only about the law making power of the parliament. எப்படி whatever law made by the parliament will be made applicable to the whole of India or the whole of the territory or part of India. இந்தியா முழுவதற்கும் இந்திய பாராளுமன்றம் இயற்றக்கூடிய சட்டங்கள் பொருந்தும் அப்படிங்கிறது. அதுலயே நம்பர் 245ல இன்னொரு ப்ரொவிஷன் என்ன அப்படின்னா, the laws made by the state legislature will be made applicable for the whole part of the state. அப்போ state legislature enact பண்ணக்கூடிய laws will be applicable only to the states. The extent of the law making power is given under 245. Right. Now coming to the territorial angle and all those things, now we are going into one particular doctrine of the constitution. Right, more doctrines will be, I'm dumping you with more doctrines, just take note of it. Any doubts you can just make note of it and we'll have a discussion. The first doctrine under article 245 and 246 is that the doctrine of territorial nexus. Adha sonna sharing of power, the extent of sharing of powers, the limit of territorial jurisdiction. Say union made law is confined to the whole of India, state made law is confined to the only to that respective state concerned. Now the doctrine of territorial nexus is the first and foremost doctrine in the constitutional jurisprudence, which talks that the parliament alone is having the power under article 245 to make a law for having any extraterritorial operation. அப்படின்னா என்ன, இந்தியா முழுமைக்கும் இந்த சட்டம் பொருந்துமா அல்லது வேற எங்காவது இந்த சட்டங்கள் பொருந்துமா, இல்ல ஹோல் பார்ட் ஆஃப் இந்தியாவுக்கு பொருந்துமா, இல்ல பர்டிகுலர் பார்ட்டுக்கு பொருந்துமா, இப்படிங்கிறதையெல்லாம் தீர்மானம் பண்ணக்கூடிய வேலை, அதற்கான தீர்மானம் பண்ணக்கூடிய அதிகாரம் யார் இடத்துல இருக்குது அப்படின்னா 245(1) particularly talks about this territoriality, territorial nexus. Parliament alone is having the power. அதுதான் 245 clause 1. அப்ப what about the states? State legislatures per se do not have any power under article 245. Yes, 248 பின்னாடி வருவோம். one by one we will just come to one by one. Residuary powers அது அங்க வரோம், அது இங்க இல்ல. இங்க we are talking about the predominant law making powers is determined by the union தான். அப்போ ஸ்டேட்டுக்கே law making power எவ்வளோ, அதனுடைய எல்லை என்ன, உச்ச வரம்பு என்ன அப்படின்னு தீர்மானம் பண்ணக்கூடியதை யார் தீர்மானிக்கலாம்னா பாராளுமன்றம் தீர்மானிக்கலாம் அப்படிங்கிறதான் 245(1). நெக்ஸ்ட், ஏன் இந்த மாதிரியான பவர் ஸ்டேட்டுக்கு கொடுக்காம சென்டருக்கு மட்டும் கொடுத்துருக்காங்க? This is the point I want to drive home here. The reason being, often the state is making some laws, particular reference to some tax, levying of tax. So these tax legislations are often the subject matter of question, saying that on the ground of extraterritoriality. Yes, doctrine of territorial nexus. Territorial nexus, NEXUS. NEXUS, அதுதான் இப்ப பார்த்துட்டு இருக்கிறோம். இப்போ ஸ்டேட் கவர்மெண்ட் at times they are making the tax laws. Sometime we may also come across this GST அந்த பொழுது, ரைட்? இந்த சென்ட்ரல் கவர்மெண்ட் ஜிஎஸ்டி கவுன்சில் போட்ட போது ஒரு ஸ்டேட்டும் ஒரு மாதிரி ஜிஎஸ்டி ரேட்ஸுக்கு வந்து ஒத்துக்க மாட்டேங்கிறாங்க, ரைட்? ஆல் தீஸ் திங்ஸ் previously in 2006 and 2007 VAT, சென்வாட் or value added tax ஒரு ஸ்டேட் ஒரு மாதிரி வச்சுட்டு இருந்தாங்க, ரைட்? So if you extend these laws span across India jurisdiction to all over India, the territory of India, now some states may be having difficulty in implementing, or for that reason it is sometime one particular state may be having one design or one fashion of state tax law, the other government will be having, state will be having the different state legislations, tax legislations. These are all questioned before the courts as such on the ground of extraterritoriality. ரைட்? ஸோ இந்த மாதிரி எக்ஸ்ட்ரா டெரிட்டோரியல் ஆபரேஷன் வருது. இப்போ தமிழ்நாட்டில் இருக்கக்கூடிய டேக்ஸ்லாம் தமிழ்நாட்டுக்கு மாத்திரம் தான் பொருந்துமா, இல்லை தமிழ்நாட்டில இருந்து ஏதாவது ஒரு கூட்ஸ் எடுத்துட்டு இப்போ வேற ஸ்டேட்டுக்கு, இன்டர் ஸ்டேட் ட்ரேட் அண்ட் காமர்ஸ் இட் இஸ் பாசிங், அந்த கூட்ஸ் ஆர் மூவிங் ஆன் த்ரூ தி அதர் ஸ்டேட்ஸ். ஒரு ஸ்டேட்டுக்கும் போகும்போது வேல்யூ அடிஷன்ஸ் வருமா? வேட் வந்த போது, வேல்யூ ஆடட் டேக்ஸ் வந்த போது எழுப்பின கேள்வி இது. அப்படி இருக்கும்போது வெதர் தீஸ் டேக்ஸ் லா enacted by the state legislature is having application only within the state of Tamil Nadu, or do it have an extraterritorial operation, any kind of thing? So this was the question raised under territorial nexus doctrine. Now the court started in this context applying the doctrine of territorial nexus, which means that if there is some connection or nexus between the state law enacted by the state legislature and the very object for which the law is being enacted, which is sought to be achieved, you have to find out or to give a fitting reason saying that what is the kind of the law which is being enacted by the state. Number one, this is the first question to be answered under territorial nexus doctrine. Right. Now, what is the purpose for the state making that law, or the state legislature coming out with this law? Right. Now, what number three? What is the object which is going to be achieved by the state by enacting such a law? அப்போ ஸ்டேட்டுக்கு இந்த லா எனாக்ட் பண்றதுக்கு பவர் இருக்கா ஃபர்ஸ்ட் பார்க்கணும். அப்படி இருந்தா வாட் இஸ் த பர்பஸ் தி ஸ்டேட் ஹஸ் மேட் தட் லா? Now what is the object which is going to be achieved by the state by enacting that state made law? These are all the things. This is the nexus. So these three nexus have to be proved when you challenge the territoriality or extraterritorial operation of a particular act passed by the state legislature. We are not talking about center, the state legislature. Right. I can explain you better with one case law. State of Bombay versus RMD Shamar Bakwala. State of Bombay versus RMDC. அப்படின்னு போட்டுங்க, அதான் ஈஸி. Right. State of Bombay versus RMDC. AIR 1957, Supreme Court 699. AIR 1957, Supreme Court 699. Now, a particular piece of law, namely Price Competition Act, which was challenged by the people, which was enacted by the Bombay or Maharashtra government. Now, what has happened is, now the court went on to say, the very purpose of this Price Competition Act is to regulate some kind of activities in the name of price, or what we say, this lottery shit regulations and all those things, right? Right, the price and all those things. Kulukal sheet இதெல்லாம் சொல்றோம்ல, அந்த மாதிரி அதை ரெகுலேட் பண்றதுக்காக பாம்பே மகாராஷ்டிரா கவர்மெண்ட் had enacted a law, Price Competition Act, sometime in 1956-57 or whatever it is. So it was challenged before the Supreme Court. Now the contention is that what is the purpose which the state is coming out with this law? That must be established. Now the very purpose or object of the law is that to have the application of this law only to the state of Bombay, or physically you are extending the limits or territoriality even outside the jurisdiction or geographical jurisdiction of Bombay. இதுதான். Right. Now this is the first thing which you have to understand in case of territoriality. அப்படின்னா இப்போ இந்த law made by the Maharashtra government, first it has to answer, pass the test of territorial nexus. It must satisfy the court by saying that whether the law made by the state legislature is having application only with reference to the state of Maharashtra alone. Right. If it is extending the scope or territorial limits of jurisdiction beyond the state of Maharashtra, now state should be justified in explaining or what is the reason that necessitated the state to extend the scope of territoriality of operation beyond the state of Maharashtra or jurisdiction of Maharashtra. இப்போ மகாராஷ்டிராக்கு மட்டும்தான் அந்த சட்டம் பொருந்தும் அப்படிங்கறத ப்ரூவ் பண்ணணும். இல்ல மகாராஷ்டிராவை தாண்டி மற்ற ஸ்டேட்டுக்கும் இது அப்ளை ஆகும் அப்படின்னா, பிசிக்கலி if it is going to apply, what is the reason the state is giving application extra territorial nature அப்படிங்கறத ப்ரூவ் பண்ணணும். So the object which the law want to achieve must be put it at the first instance. Now what is the extent of application of extra territorial nature? Why it is being done on an extra territorial nature? ஏன் மகாராஷ்டிராக்கு மட்டும் இல்லாம மற்ற ஸ்டேட்டுக்கு அப்ளை பண்ணலாம் அப்படிங்கறத ப்ரூவ் பண்ணணும். All these things are satisfied, then it is within the power of the state legislature. The state legislature can make good or hold good that law has passed the test of doctrine of territorial nexus, and the court can upheld, or courts will upheld certainly, by saying that it is constitutionally valid on the premise of even extraterritorial application or operation. The states are having power to extend its territoriality beyond the scope of their lawmaking or beyond the geographical extent of their jurisdiction. அப்படிங்கறத ப்ரூவ் பண்ணணும். The same similar position was upheld subsequently some 2 or 3 years later in state of Bihar versus State of Bihar versus Charusila Das. Charusila, Charusila, Charusila Das, DAS Das. AIR 1959, Supreme Court 1002. AIR 1959, Supreme Court 1002. So once again, it's upheld. The Supreme Court was in a position to uphold the ruling given in state of Bombay versus RMTC, saying that the state legislature has the power to legislate with respect to any matters or any particular subject matter, even though if it is outside or if it is a particular part of the issue in hand is outside the territory, also the state can make a law. Say for example, in this case, state of Bihar versus Charusila Das, the very cynical facts of the case would go this way. The state legislature had enacted some laws to regulate the religious and charitable institutions within the territory of state of Bihar. Right. What has happened? One particular organization or the other religious organization outfits, they are having the properties, though they have registered within the state of Bihar, they are possessing or having properties purchased or managing properties in the name of the trust, religious trust, outside the territorial jurisdiction of Bihar. Bihar state kulla register பண்ணி இயங்கிட்டு வரக்கூடிய மத நிறுவனங்கள் அல்லது whatever you say, the charitable institutions, they do have possessed property outside the state of Bihar. Whether the state has got jurisdiction, the state of Bihar has got jurisdiction to pass a law or to legislate a law to cover even with the properties which are situated outside the jurisdiction of the state. This is what the question. Whether the power of the state of Bihar is now extended extraterritorially to even cover the properties that are so being managed or that are so being situated outside the territorial or geographical extent of Bihar. This is the question. Now the court held, once again the Supreme Court has held, the territorial nexus will be apt enough to be applied in such circumstances where, right, the state legislature has got the power to legislate with respect to any property or subject matter, though it is situated outside any part of the property, outside the jurisdiction of the state, whether or not it is a small in number or large in number, that can be regulated by the state. Right? The very registration of the particular trust or the religious institution would per se be under the Bihar government or the state of Bihar concern. So whatever is being applicable in Bihar, right, now the state government is as if though extending its application mutatis mutandis to that of those properties which are being situated in the name of the very same trust. வேற ஒரு ட்ரஸ்ட்டுக்கு இல்ல, அதே ட்ரஸ்ட். ஒரு ட்ரஸ்ட்டுக்கு பீகார்லயும் ப்ராப்பர்ட்டி இருக்கு, ரைட், ராஜஸ்தான்லயும் ப்ராப்பர்ட்டி இருக்கு, ரைட். So now the law making powers would ipso facto cover those properties which are rested or which are vested in other state also, situated in other state also, by extending the theory of doctrine of territorial nexus. So this is the very, very important doctrine as such under sharing of powers or distribution of powers in 7th schedule. Now coming to the very categorical listing of items or chronological listing of items under 7th schedule. இதுதான் முக்கியம். இப்போ இவ்வளோ நேரம் சொன்ன doctrinesலயே the very important facet which we are looking into. What is the schematic distribution of powers அப்படின்னா, union list, state list, concurrent list. These are all the lists which are not exhaustive on all the legislative subjects. எல்லா ஐட்டம்ஸும் இதில் இருக்கிறதெல்லாம் எக்ஸாஸ்டிவ் லிஸ்டான்னு பார்த்தா கிடையாது. Something may not also be covered, right? State listல இருக்கலாம், சிலது யூனியன் லிஸ்ட்ல இருக்கலாம், ரெண்டுலையுமே சேர்ந்து கன்கரண்ட் லிஸ்ட்லயும் வரலாம். It may overlap also. It is not an exhaustive thing, I say. So union list, it covers up to 97 items. இதுதான் முக்கியம். இதெல்லாம் யூபிஎஸ்சிக்கு, டிஎன்பிஎஸ்சி, ஜுடிஷியல் சர்வீஸ் எக்ஸாம்ஸ்க்கு யூஸ் ஆகிற கொஸ்டின், ரைட். யூனியன் லிஸ்ட் எவ்வளோ ஐட்டம்ஸ் இருக்கு அப்படின்னா, it is 97 items where the Parliament of India alone has got an exclusive access or power to make a law on this 97 items union list. The next is state list covering up to 66 items, where state legislature of the respective states alone will have the jurisdiction exclusively to make a law. Now coming to the sharing of powers in the concurrent list, covering up to 47 items. These 47 items, both the Parliament of India as well the state legislatures are competent enough to make a parallel legislation. State power irukku, center power irukku. Yaar venalum enact pannalam. I will give practical examples, don't worry. Right. So union list 97 items, state list 66 items, and 47 items are in concurrent list. Now, இது எதுலயுமே இல்லாத சிலது இருக்குது. இந்த மூணு லிஸ்ட்லயும் கவர் அப் ஆகாம இருக்கக்கூடிய சப்ஜெக்ட் மேட்டர் we call it as article 248. Someone was right enough to point out residuary subjects or residuary powers with reference to entry number 97 of list 1. இங்க just make note of the list 1 ல entry 97 ல any other matter which are not enumerated in either state list or in concurrent list. ஸ்டேட் லிஸ்ட்லயோ கன்கரண்ட் லிஸ்ட்லயோ சொல்லப்படாத விஷயங்களை ரெசிடியூரி சப்ஜெக்ட்ஸ்ல லா மேக் பண்றதுக்கு பார்லிமெண்ட்டுக்கு அதிகாரம் இருக்கு. அவ்வளவுதான், வேற ஒண்ணும் இல்லை. So the parliament is having power under 248 residuary powers. அப்ப யூனியன் லிஸ்ட்லயும் சொல்லல, ஸ்டேட் லிஸ்ட்லயும் சொல்லல, கன்கரண்ட் லிஸ்ட்லயும் சொல்லப்படாத விஷயம் அப்படி ஏதாவது இருந்துச்சு அப்படின்னா இதர மிஸ்லேனியஸ் ஐட்டம்ஸ் ரெசிடியூரி, ரைட், குறிப்பிடப்படாத சங்கதிகள் ஏதாவது இருந்ததுன்னா அது குறித்து சட்டம் இயற்றும் அதிகாரம் மீண்டும் பாராளுமன்றத்திடம் தான் இருக்கிறது. Parliament has got the exclusive power once again by taking article 248 as the shelter by way of residuary powers, right? There some tax matters will also be there, we will be discussing, right? So article 248 is the provision governing residuary powers, right? இப்ப எப்படி எல்லாம் article 245 ல இருந்து 245 6 7 8 எல்லாம் powers பார்த்தோம். Different list we have discussed. Now entering into the very important aspects of various doctrines involved for interpretation of center state relation with reference to article 245 46 etc. The doctrines as such will be thrown light on the powers of center state relation. The first and foremost doctrine on this interpretation is doctrine of plenary powers, PLENARY, plenary powers, right? Article 246 talks about once a topic which is being comprised within any of the entries in the three list as above. Now that particular respective legislature is fully competent enough to enact a law within the subject which are assigned to it. அப்ப மேல சொல்லி இருக்க மூணு லிஸ்ட்ல இருக்கக்கூடிய ஏதாவது சப்ஜெக்ட் மேட்டர், whatever this 97 66 47 all these, இந்த மூணு லிஸ்ட்ல இருக்கக்கூடிய ஐட்டம்ஸ்ல என்ன ஐட்டம் எந்தெந்த லிஸ்டுக்கு கீழே இருக்கோ அதற்கு தகுந்தாற்போல் அந்தந்த லெஜிஸ்லேச்சருக்கு, இப்போ யூனியன் லிஸ்ட்ல இருந்ததுன்னா பார்லிமெண்ட் has got the exclusive power of making law or full power of making laws on that subject matter. அதே மாதிரி ஸ்டேட் லிஸ்ட்ல இருந்துச்சுன்னா whatever the state government alone is having power, இது மாதிரி இருக்கு. Now the legislative power or competence of these bodies are plenary or plenty in nature. அவ்வளவுதான், plenary-னா ஒண்ணும் இல்லை. அப்படின்னா என்ன, ஆர்டிகல் 245 கீழே ஏற்கனவே டிஸ்ட்ரிபியூஷன் ஆஃப் பவர்ஸ் பார்த்தோம். அதே மாதிரி 246ல whatever is stated, once a particular subject matter is enlisted under a particular list, no other authority or no other government should encroach or usurp the power of the other body and enact law. இப்போ யூனியன் லிஸ்ட்ல ஒரு சப்ஜெக்ட் மேட்டர் இருக்கு அப்படின்னு வச்சுக்கோங்க. அந்த 97 ஐட்டம்ஸ்ல ஏதோ ஒரு ஐட்டமுக்கு ஒரு மேட்டர் இருக்கு. இதுல சட்டம் இயற்ற வேண்டிய அதிகாரம்னு வருது. இதுல ஸ்டேட் கவர்மெண்ட்டுக்கு ஏதாவது ரோல் இருக்கா? நோ. It is within the predominant power or dominant role of the central government alone to make a law with reference to these 97 items. Now, state government cannot overlook and it cannot usurp or observe the power of the state central governments and say that I will go and make a law in respect of the 97 items, whatever any one of the 97 items. The other legislative body shall not encroach or shall not oversee or shall not overstep. Right? There must be a Lakshman Rekha drawn between these two authorities, namely the central government and the state government. So that is why I say the other legislative body is per se prohibited and it shall not usurp the power or encroach into the domain of the particular legislature, which alone is having fully competent power to make law. அப்ப பார்லிமெண்ட் லா மேக் பண்ற இடத்துல ஸ்டேட் கவர்மெண்ட் போய் உள்ள குறுக்க பூந்துக்கிட்டு குறுக்கீடு எது செஞ்சுக்கிட்டு நான் தான் லா மேக் பண்ணுவேன்னு சொல்ல முடியாது, சொல்லக்கூடாது. That is what is being envisaged under Article 246. Say for example, there are certain other powers even in concurrent list also. In entry number 42 of concurrent list number 3. So entry number 42 of list number 3, the parliament's power is unrestricted. So if you may take entry number 42 of list number 3, you can just find a provision over there. If you have a bare text, just take the provision under 7th schedule, right? So இத பொறுத்த வரைக்கும் யாருக்கு பவர் இருக்கு அப்படின்னா, it is the power of the parliament, which is unrestricted power of the parliament to make a law for governing the properties under land acquisition, right? So union government may acquire certain lands even though it is vested with the state under the pretext of land acquisition. இதுதான் entry number 42, more particularly under list number 3, concurrent listல 42 எடுத்து பாத்தீங்கன்னா இருக்கும். You can just look into concurrent list, right? Acquisition and requisition of property. Appo state central government can acquire or require or request the state government, even though the property is vested with the state government, it can acquire for any public purpose. மாநில அரசுகளுடைய வசம் இருக்கக்கூடிய ஏதாவது சொத்துக்களை பொறுத்தவரை மத்திய அரசு வந்து ஏதாவது கையகப்படுத்த வேண்டிய நடவடிக்கைகள் மேற்கொள்ற மாதிரி இருந்துச்சுன்னா, it can use the power under article or more particularly 246 with reference to the entry number 42 of list 3 to acquire that land from the state government. So state cannot come and say concurrent listல இது இருக்கு, அப்ப எனக்கும் இதுல லா மேக் பண்ற பவர் இருக்குன்னு வந்து state government cannot come and encroach into the domain of that particular legislative competence of the parliament as such, right? This is what the doctrine of plenary powers is. That this is the first rule. The next rule we talk about rule of supremacy. So when we come to article 246 and it is read along with 7th schedule, it provides for distribution of powers, right? Union list, state list, concurrent list, as we discussed, right? Now parliament has also got power to make with reference to residuary powers. So what is that supremacy doctrine? It started with a non-obstante clause. Article 246 எடுத்து பாத்தீங்கன்னா you can able to distinguish article 246 246 clause 1. It starts with a non-obstante clause, namely notwithstanding or subject to. What is that subject to? Subject to anything whatever contained in clause 2 or 3, right? Or subject to the provisions as aforementioned under clause 1. அப்ப 246 clause 1க்கு என்ன provisions இருக்கோ அதற்கு உட்பட்டு தான் பார்லிமெண்ட் வந்து லா மேக் பண்ணணும், right? So the law making power is not so supreme with the parliament. The parliament once again, while making such a law, exercising the principle of union supremacy, but that union supremacy itself is subjected to the constitutional background or constitutional parameter of article 246. அப்படின்னா என்ன, பார்லிமெண்ட்டுக்கு பவர் இருக்குது அப்படிங்கிற காரணத்தினால மட்டுமே எதை வேணாலும் பார்லிமெண்ட் எனாக்ட் பண்ணிட்டே இருக்கக்கூடாது, right? I can say very easily, right? If it is some overlapping entries in the 3 list, union list, state list, concurrent list, இது மூணுலயும் இருக்கக்கூடிய சப்ஜெக்ட் மேட்டர்ஸ்ல ஏதாவது ரெபுடேஷன் இருக்கு, திரும்ப திரும்ப ஏதாவது ரெபுடேஷன் இருக்கு அப்படின்னா இப்போ வாட் இஸ் தி பவர் ஆஃப் தி யூனியன் அப்படிங்கறத டிசைட் பண்றாங்க ஆர்டிகல் 246ல, ரைட்? நவ If any subject matter, it is categorized under union list, state list, and concurrent list. Out of these subject matters, if some repetition is there, if there is an irreconcilable conflict arising out of this overlapping of the subject matter, union listலயும் இருக்கு, state listலயும் இருக்கு. இப்படி இருக்கிறதுனால now who will be predominantly dominating the will of other body அப்படின்னா it is the parliament once again. அதனாலதான் union government is having the will or supremacy to decide upon making the law. அப்போ இது சப்ஜெக்ட் மேட்டர் ஓவர்லாப்பிங்கா இருந்து இதுல யாருக்கு சட்டம் இயற்றக்கூடிய அதிகாரம் வருதுங்கிற பிரச்சனை முட்டிக்கும் பொழுது இதை ரிசால்வ் பண்ணக்கூடிய, இது ரெக்கன்சைல் பண்ணக்கூடிய விஷயமையும் யார் தீர்மானம் பண்ணலாம்னா it can be decided by the parliament under article 246 class 1, right? Once again, it is the rule of union government, right? Because union assumes more supremacy, we call it as union supremacy, rule of union supremacy, where union government assumes more competence to legislate or overlapping entries are there. It is the predominant role of the central government. I can give you the present day context example. இப்ப பார்த்திருப்போம் recent issue of NEET. What happens with reference to higher education, right? Higher education அப்படிங்கறத எடுத்து பார்த்தோம்னா it is now list number 1, entry 63, 64, 65. Right? What are all entry 63, 64, 65 talks about? It is union list. It is the power of the government of India, central government, to make any policy, to make out any law by virtue of invoking the powers under entry 63, 64 and 65 to govern the institutions of national importance. It is 63. Now coming to 64. Any institutions to be regulated for the purpose of scientific technical education financed by government of India and declared by the parliament as institutions of national importance. What is that national importance? Now we are signifying with the context of NEET, national level eligibility or entrance eligibility test, whatever it is, right? So to regulate any particular education within the framework of national importance, it is once again the central government has got the power to enact laws by virtue of these provisions. இதனாலதான் பிரச்சனை. நிறைய states now they are saying that they don't want NEET, they want to withdraw NEET. They are opposing the central government's proposal to bring in NEET examination. இங்கதான் ஆரம்பிக்கும். So entry 65, the next entry, it particularly says about the union agencies and institutions for professional or vocational technical education or technical training, promotion of special studies or scientific or technical assistance, etc., etc. Right? This one. 66 vaanga, very very clear. The coordination and determination of the standards insofar institutions of higher education or research and scientific and technical institutions will be determined by central government. Ingada government of India assumes supremacy and it is mandating or directing the states to follow its policy of NEET in principle. Ingada ஆரம்பிக்குது பிரச்சனை, right? So now constitution by virtue of article 246 and also the entries enlisted under list number 1, namely entry 63, 64, 65 and 66, it has given power to the union government to regulate that matters which are within the importance of the education is concerned, or higher education or technical education is concerned. So this is how the state is given a lesser role, or union is assuming more supremacy or a superfluous role or a superior role in terms of determination of these kind of activities which are governed under list number 1 of the 7th schedule, right? Passing for a while, now going to a next situation wherein if laws are made by both state as well center, right? If there is some conflict between the central lawmaking power or the union list and state list, how to resolve that conflict? இப்போ யூனியன் லிஸ்ட்ல இருக்க ஒரு ப்ரொவிஷன் இருக்கு 7th ஷெட்யூல்ல, ஸ்டேட் லிஸ்ட்லயும் ஒரு ப்ரொவிஷன் இருக்கு. இந்த ப்ரொவிஷன்ஸ்ல ஏதாவது ஒண்ணுக்கு ஒண்ணு ஒரு முரண்பாடு வருது, இட் இஸ் கமிங் இன்டு டைரக்ட் கான்ஃப்ளிக்ட் வித் ஈச் அதர். So how to resolve such a conflict by applying the principles of constitutional law for center state relation? It is being governed by yet another doctrine called as the doctrine of harmonious construction. இதெல்லாம் ரொம்ப ரொம்ப important. I'm just explaining you with the help of case laws. So what is that simpliciter doctrine of harmonious construction talks about? It says that in case of any conflict between the matters or subjects falling within the jurisdiction of each legislature of two lists, namely union list and state list, and in a case to resolve such a conflict between these two lists, the provisions or the subject matters in these two lists must be conjointly read together, and the language of the statute must be read in a harmonious way, in a balanced way, and it must be construed in a more harmony with harmony. அப்படின்னா என்னன்னா, யூனியன் லிஸ்டுக்கும் ஸ்டேட் லிஸ்ட்ல இருக்கக்கூடிய ஏதாவது ப்ரொவிஷன்ஸுக்கு கான்ஃபிளிக்ட், டைரக்ட் கான்ஃபிளிக்ட் வந்து ஒன்னோட ஒண்ணு முட்டிக்குது. எப்படி ஃபண்டமெண்டல் ரைட்ஸுக்கும் டைரக்டிவ் பிரின்சிபிள்ஸ்க்கும் கான்ஃபிளிக்ட் வந்துச்சுன்னா, டு ரிசால்வ் தட் இஷ்யூ ஆர் சிச்சுவேஷன் we invoke the doctrine of harmonious construction. The same way, now where there is a conflict between any of the subject matters under the union list on one hand and the state list on the other, to resolve such a conflict, now this doctrine of harmonious construction have to be used, and the statute that are coming into conflict with each other must be balancedly construed in a harmonious way. I can just give you one example with the help of a case law. Just take down Gujarat University versus Krishna Ranganath Mudalkar, Mudholkar, Krishna Ranganath Mudalkar, AIR 1963, Supreme Court 703. This is one case law, Gujarat University versus Krishna Ranganath Mudalkar. The next case law which we will be discussing now, DAV College versus State of Punjab AIR 1971, Supreme Court 1731. Right, AIR 1971, Supreme Court 1731. So it's nothing but, see, one particular provision in the union list was under challenge. What is that issue is that the Punjab University Act in the year 1961, it prescribed imparting Punjabi as the sole medium of instruction for all the university level colleges affiliated to the Punjab University, and conducting examination in Punjabi language. பஞ்சாபி மொழியை பயிற்று மொழியாக பல்கலைக்கழகங்களிலும் கல்லூரிகளிலும் புகுத்துவது குறித்து தான் இந்த கேஸ். But now what has happened is that this was challenged, saying that the power to regulate such a kind of a thing is exclusively within entry 66 of list number 1. What is entry 66? We can just have a look into entry number 66 of list number 1. Right, entry 66 of list number 1, it talks about the coordination. I was just pointing out earlier, the coordination and determination of standards in institutions of higher education or research and scientific and technical institutions. அப்போ உயர்கல்வி நிறுவனங்களில் இருக்கக்கூடிய கொள்கைகளை அரசு வந்து யார் முடிவு பண்ணலாம் பிரதானமாக அப்படின்னா, it is the parliament's role or union government can decide to bring about a change or to make prescribe some kind of a policy measure. The center is saying only central government or parliament is having power to decide on that subject matter, whereas in the given case the state legislature has enacted the state law, Punjab University Act 1961, and now by virtue of that law the state is now saying that making mandatory Punjabi as the sole medium of instruction for examination and for teaching in the affiliated colleges. So now that was challenged before the Supreme Court. Now the Supreme Court has said no state government has got the legislative competence to prescribe such kind of a particular medium of instruction of language in respect of higher education. Why? Because higher education, which is in the ambit of dominion of union government under union list by virtue of entry number 66. So the state government cannot now come and interfere with the power of the parliament in so far as making law to regulate the higher education is concerned, as it is governed solely under entry number 66 of list number 1. அப்போ பார்லிமெண்ட்டுக்கோ யூனியன் கவர்மெண்ட்டுக்கோ இருக்கக்கூடிய பவரை you cannot come and meddle with, or you cannot just interfere with the power of the parliament in that particular matters which are exclusively enlisted under union list. This is what is the held portion of the ruling in DAV College case, as it regulates or as it relates to the doctrine of harmonious construction. அப்போ ஸ்டேட் லா இந்த இடத்துல முட்டுது எதோட? சென்ட்ரல் யூனியன் மேட் லா என்ட்ரி நம்பர் 66 லிஸ்ட் 1 கூட முட்டுது. எது? பஞ்சாப் யூனிவர்சிட்டி ஆக்ட். So now that has to be construed by saying, by looking into, by weighing the circumstances, whether by making out a harmonious balance, by holding that the power usurped or power which is being taken by the state government is coming into direct conflict with the union government or not, must be decided. Right, this is the first issue. Now similarly, there is yet another issue, right? The issue being doctrine of pith and substance. There is next doctrine. What is that doctrine of pith and substance? Is that when a legislative competence of the legislature is challenged in the court with reference to any entries in different list, right? See, state list la or entry irukku, union list la or entry irukku. So or enactment is challenged, one particular enactment is challenged with reference to the entries in different list. The reason because the law dealing with this subject in one list within the competence of the legislature concerned is also touching upon the subject in another list, which is not within the competence of that legislature. அப்படின்னா என்னன்னா, say for example, யூனியன் லிஸ்ட்ல ஒரு பர்டிகுலர் சப்ஜெக்ட் மேட்டர் இருக்கு. இந்த சப்ஜெக்ட் மேட்டர்ல லா எனாக்ட் பண்றதுக்கு யூனியன் கவர்மெண்ட்டுக்கு மட்டும்தான் அதிகாரம் இருக்கு. இந்த மேட்டர்ல போய் ஸ்டேட் கவர்மெண்ட்டுக்கு அதிகாரமே இல்லை. ஸ்டேட் லிஸ்ட்ல அப்படி ஒரு சப்ஜெக்ட் மேட்டருக்கு அதிகாரமே கொடுக்கல ஸ்டேட்டுக்கு. அல்லது யூனியன் லிஸ்ட்ல இருக்கக்கூடிய சப்ஜெக்ட் மேட்டரை ஸ்டேட்டால டீல் பண்ணவே முடியாது, பிகாஸ் இட் லேக்ஸ் லெஜிஸ்லேட்டிவ் காம்பிடன்ஸ். இதுல போய் ஸ்டேட் நௌ இஸ் உசர்பிங் த பவர் அண்ட் மேக்கிங் எ லா. ஸ்டேட் கவர்மெண்ட் வந்து சென்ட்ரல் கவர்மெண்ட் கிட்ட இருக்கிற ரோலை வந்து அப்சால்வ் பண்ணிக்கிட்டு, ரைட், இட் இஸ் overwhelming, or I can say it is taking a diversion, and now it is absolving the power of the union government, where union alone exclusively can make the law. State is touching the subject matter unnecessarily and trying to make a law, where the state is totally covered by a different legislative list with reference to that subject matter, reference which is made in the subject matter. In such a case, the legislation made by the state must be tested based on the pith and substance. I will just tell what is pith and substance. I can say very simply, when the court is examining or scrutinizing the statute, if it is finding out that the legislation which is in question in substance before the court on any subject matter assigned to a particular legislature, namely the parliament or whatever, if it is enacting a particular law, the act must be held valid only to the entirety, right? If it is incidentally trenching upon the matters beyond its competence, if it is overlapping the matters which are encroaching the matters which are held to be not within the purview of that law making authority. அப்ப என்ன, எனக்கு அதிகாரமே இல்லை, இல்லாமலே நான் வந்து அதிகாரத்தை ஆக்கிரமிப்பு செய்து ஐ எம் என்க்ரோச்சிங் into the domain or jurisdiction of some other authority and I am making out a law wherein I do not have prima facie a power to make a law. எனக்கு சட்டம் இயற்றுவதற்கு அதுக்கு அதிகாரமே கொடுக்கல, அதிகார வரம்பே எனக்கு இல்லை, அதை மீறியும் நான் ஒரு லா எனாக்ட் பண்றேன் அப்படின்னா, now court have to now just look into and justify itself by saying the law so being enacted beyond the legislative competence of the legislature. Yes, arbitrary exercise. That's beyond the ultra vires. Arbitrary exercise is ultra vires. Now the law which is being made by the parliament is beyond the scope of the power, right? And overlapping, trying to overlap the power of the parliament. Now this is how is categorically held in State of Bombay versus F.N. Balsara, leading landmark judgment to this. State of Bombay versus F.N. Balsara, AIR 1951, Supreme Court 318. So pith and substance rule applies when the parliament and state legislatures are legislating on the very same list, right, but with reference to different entries, right? For applying doctrine of pith and substance, or to determine whether the law of the parliament or an existing law of the state are on the very same subject matter, right? Now, even if they pertain to different matters or not, now if the pith and substance of these laws are same, then court can test that particular subject matter. If the pith and substance of that laws are not same, then court may deal it otherwise. அப்போ பார்லிமெண்ட்டும் அதே சப்ஜெக்ட் மேட்டர்ல ஒரு லா எனாக்ட் பண்றாங்க, ஸ்டேட் கவர்மெண்ட்டும் அதே சப்ஜெக்ட் மேட்டரை once again it is coming into the very power of the parliament and enacting the law. What is the point in making a law for which already there is a law? பார்லிமெண்ட்டே ஏற்கனவே ஒரு சட்டம் போட்டு அதுக்கு வச்சிருக்கும் பொழுது unnecessarily why the state is making a law for very same reason? So now court has to now determine by saying that whether the law made by the parliament on the existing law, அதாவது ஏற்கனவே பார்லிமெண்ட் enact பண்ணி வச்சிருக்க existing lawலயே on the very same subject matterலயே whether the state is also going to make a law once again. Now if it is doing so, the state is doing so, now what is the effect of overlapping entries between the state made law and the central law அப்படிங்கறது பார்க்கணும். If the state is justified saying that there is no overlapping or the no features are overlapped, அப்ப ஸ்டேட் லாவுக்கும் சென்ட்ரல் லாவுக்கும் எந்த ஓவர்லாப்பிங் இல்ல அப்படின்னு ப்ரூவ் பண்ணணும். அதுதான் pith and substanceங்கிறது. So long as the farmer is in the question of pith and substance of the state made law is the very same pith and substance of the central made law, right? அதுல இருக்க அதே ஷரத்துக்கள் தான் அதே சட்டத்துல அதே இருக்கக்கூடிய ப்ரொவிஷன்ஸ் தான் திருப்பியும் இதுலயும் கொண்டு வந்திருக்காங்கறா இல்லையா, இல்ல வேற ஏதாச்சும் டிஃபரன்ஸ் இருக்கா அப்படிங்கறத it has to be decided by the or it has to be proved by the state as such. This was so held in a recent case, offshore holdings private limited, offshore holdings private limited versus Bangalore Development Authority, offshore holdings private limited versus Bangalore Development Authority, 2011 3 SCC 139, 2011 3 SCC 139 was once again confirmed in yet another case, earlier decision, Girnar Traders, GIRNAR, Girnar Traders versus State of Maharashtra, Girnar Traders versus State of Maharashtra, 2011 3 SCC page number 1, 2011 3 SCC page number 1, right? So the true nature of the legislation have to be taken into consideration. The title or the very same replica of the act is immaterial. ஒரே மாதிரி பேர் இருக்குது ஆக்டுக்கு, ஸ்டேட் மேட் லாவுக்கும் சென்ட்ரல் மேட் லாவுக்கும் அப்படிங்கிறது முக்கியம் கிடையாது. The very purpose to be decided under pith and substance is that the act has to be read in whole. சட்டம் முழுமையாக படிக்கப்பட்டு ரெண்டு லாவுடையும் முழுமையான சரத்துக்கள் ஒன்னை போல ஒன்று ஒரே மாதிரி தோற்றமுடைய சரத்துக்கள் வைத்திருக்கிறார்களா என்பதை உறுதிப்படுத்திக் கொள்ள வேண்டும், right? So it has to be ascertained the very true nature and character of the legislature as a whole, and the scope of those provisions under those legislations must be taken into consideration. Okay. This is one particular doctrine. Now coming to yet another doctrine, right? Is very, very important. You might all know popular doctrine, doctrine of colorable legislation. Very simple. One line la solla colorable legislation. What you cannot do directly, you cannot do indirectly. Whatever power you are not having in a direct way, you are conferred with, you cannot usurp the power and do it in an indirect way. Thalaiya sutti mooku thoda mudiyadu. It's that simple. I want to drive the point I want to drive home is very, very simple. You cannot do it in an indirect fashion, even if it is not provided for you to do it directly. நேரடியாக நேர்முகமாக செய்ய முடியாத ஒரு விஷயத்தை ஒரு சட்டம் இயற்றி மறைமுகமாக செய்திடல் ஆகாது, செய்திட முடியாது. The Constitution of India, it distributes the legislative power, as we have just seen, between amongst the various lawmaking bodies under 7th schedule within the respective spheres. Now, the lawmaking body, namely the parliament or the state legislature, is now duty bound to act according within the limits of its lawmaking power as provided under list 1, 2, 3. If in case, if it is transgressing or encroaching these powers, transgression, you are exceeding the powers or you are acting beyond the scope of powers arbitrarily, you are violating or you are just moving beyond the scope of your powers and enacting a particular law insofar as the subject matter of a particular statute, which is not falling within your legislative competence. உங்களுக்கு சட்டம் இயற்றுவதற்கு அந்த ஒரு குறிப்பிட்ட விஷயம் பொறுத்த வரைக்கும் அதிகாரமே இல்லை. The legislative body is incompetent to make a law, but the legislative authority is enacting a law beyond the scope of its power, violative of the Constitution. It is called as colorable legislation. So you cannot do it directly. You are doing it some indirect way. You are exceeding the scope of your power guaranteed under the Constitution, under the 7th schedule, and now you are doing it in a more indirect fashion. That is not permissible in law, in Constitution particularly. Very, very famous case laws are there in relevant in connection with colorable legislation. KC Gajapati Narayan Dio versus State of Orissa. KC Gajapati Narayan Dio versus State of Orissa. AIR 1953, Supreme Court 375. AIR 1953, Supreme Court 375. This is one judgment. The next judgment on the point of colorable legislation is KT Mupil Nair, MOOPIL, KT Mupil Nair versus State of Kerala. KT Mupil Nair versus State of Kerala. AIR 1961, Supreme Court 552. This is one judgment. The next followed in B.R. Shankara Narayana. B.R. Shankar Narayana versus State of Mysore. Versus State of Mysore. AIR 1966. Supreme Court 1571. Supreme Court 1571. So these are all the case laws relevant for the doctrine of colorable legislation as such. So law will be enacted by the legislative authorities only within their respective fields. Which is not capable of enacting law within the respective field, it cannot do so. It cannot proceed with making a law by transgressing or encroaching into the other authorities' legislative field or other legislatures' legislative power. So this is all what the last aspect of it, which before we are going to conclude here, is some two doctrines are here. Right. One is the residuary powers. We just talk about Article 248. So பார்லிமெண்ட்டுக்கு மாத்திரம் தான் இந்த மூணு லிஸ்ட்லயுமே கொடுக்காம இருக்கக்கூடிய சங்கதிகள் விஷயங்கள் பொறுத்து லா மேக் பண்றதுக்கு பவர் இருக்குன்னு பார்த்தோம். ஆர்டிகல் 248 அதான் ரைட். ஸோ இந்த பார்லிமெண்டோட ரெசிடுவரி பவர் இஸ் நாட் கன்ஃபைன் டு ஆல் லா மேக்கிங் பவர் as such. It does not include any law making power for imposing tax for any of these lists. அப்ப இந்த மூணு லிஸ்ட்ல ஏதாவது ஒரு லிஸ்ட்ல டாக்ஸ் லெவி பண்றது குறித்த விஷயங்கள் ஏதாவது இருந்துச்சுன்னா அதுல ஏதாவது சொல்லப்படாம இருந்ததுன்னா அதுல பார்லிமெண்ட் வந்து தலையிட்டு டாக்ஸ் இம்போஸ் பண்றதுக்கு லா மேக் பண்ண முடியாது. ஆர் யூ கேன் சே இந்த 3 லிஸ்ட்ல சொல்லப்படாம இருக்கக்கூடிய டாக்ஸஸ் ஏதாவது விட்டு போய் இருந்ததுன்னா then by invoking the residuary power under article 248 the parliament can impose tax under article 248 clause 2. அப்போ ஸ்டேட் லிஸ்ட்லயோ யூனியன் லிஸ்ட்லயோ கன்கரண்ட் லிஸ்ட்லயோ சொல்லாம விடப்பட்டிருக்கிற டாக்ஸஸ் ஏதாவது இருந்துச்சுன்னா அந்த டாக்ஸ் குறித்த விஷயங்கள்ல சட்டங்கள் பிறப்பிப்பதற்கு பாராளுமன்றத்திற்கு முழு அதிகாரம் ஆர்டிகல் 248 கிளாஸ் 2க்கு கீழே இருக்கு. இவ்வளவுதான். This is what the powers under residuary powers. Union of India versus Harbhajan Singh Dhillon. Union of India versus Harbhajan Singh Dhillon. AIR 1972, Supreme Court 1601. Right. Now we are coming into the very next aspect. Right. Very, very important aspect. We will be covering it up very shortly. Doctrine of repugnancy. ரொம்ப இம்பார்ட்டன்ட். ரெபக்னன்சி அப்படின்னா முரண்பாடு. ரூல் ஆஃப் ரெபக்னன்சி. See, for example, Article 254, we were discussed about the union supremacy between the law-making power, legislative power of the union as such. What is that rule of repugnancy? It talks about 254 we are talking about now. இங்க 245 ல பார்த்தோம். இப்போ 254 ல ஒரு ரூல் வைக்கிறாங்க. Article 254. What does 254 says? See, if any law is made by the state legislature, if it is repugnant to the provisions of the parliament, right, with which the parliament is competent to enact a law. அப்படின்னா என்ன? பார்லிமெண்ட் ஒரு லா எனாக்ட் பண்ணிருக்காங்க. பார்லிமெண்ட் போட்ட சட்டத்துக்கு முரணா ஸ்டேட் லெஜிஸ்லேட்டிவ் அசம்பிளி இஸ் நோ மேக்கிங் a law, right? More particularly with reference to one of that matter enumerated in concurrent list. அப்ப concurrent listல என்ன சொல்லியிருக்கோம்? ஏற்கனவே யூனியன் கவர்மெண்ட்டுக்கும் லா மேக்கிங் பவர் இருக்கு, ஸ்டேட் கவர்மெண்ட்டுக்கும் லா மேக்கிங் பவர் இருக்கு. இந்த பவரை யூஸ் பண்ணி ஸ்டேட் கவர்மெண்ட் has made a law wherein that law is directly coming in repugnancy or conflict to the provisions of the law made by the parliament. பாராளுமன்றம் இயற்றி வச்சிருக்கிற சட்டத்திற்கு முற்றிலும் முரண்பாடாக மாநில அரசு கன்கரண்ட் லிஸ்டுக்கு கீழே ஏதாவது ஒரு சட்டத்தை இயற்றி அதுல ஏதேனும் ஒரு முரண்பாடுகள் காணப்பட்டால் என்ன பண்றது அப்படின்னா, the law made by the legislature of the state, right, will be deemed or will be declared to be to that extent as void, as repugnant to that of the law made by the parliament. பாராளுமன்றம் ஏற்கனவே இயற்றி வைத்திருக்கக்கூடிய எக்ஸிஸ்டிங் நடைமுறையில் இருக்கக்கூடிய ஒரு சட்டத்திற்கு முரணாக மாநில அரசு சட்டமன்றத்துல ஒரு சட்டம் இயற்றி இருந்ததுன்னா, பாராளுமன்றத்துக்கு முரணாக அந்த சட்டம் இருக்கும் பட்சத்தில் இந்த சட்டமன்றத்தால் இயற்றப்பட்ட அந்த சட்டத்தை முற்றிலுமாக செல்லத்தக்கது அல்ல என்று குறிப்பிடுவதற்கு எல்லா அதிகாரமும் 254 clause 1ல இருக்கு. So the law will be declared to be repugnant and void for the reason that no state government is authorized per se to enact a law in contrary or repugnant to the law which is already made in existence by the parliament. பாராளுமன்றத்தால் ஏற்கனவே இயற்றப்பட்டு நடைமுறையில் இருக்கக்கூடிய ஒரு சட்டத்திற்கு முற்றிலும் முரண்பாடாக சட்டமன்றம் எந்த ஒரு சட்டத்தையும் இயற்றக்கூடாது. அப்படி மீறி ஒரு சட்டத்தை இயற்றினால் சட்டமன்றத்தால் இயற்றப்பட்ட அந்த ஒரு சட்டமானது செல்லத்தக்கது அல்ல, அது முற்றிலுமாக அது பாராளுமன்றத்தால் இயற்றப்பட்ட சட்டத்துக்கு முரணானது என்று அறிவித்து it will be declared as null and void or repugnant. இதுதான் ரூல் ஆஃப் ரெபக்னன்சி, ரைட். அதே மாதிரி if a law made by the state legislature in any of the matters in concurrent list, in any provisions, concurrent listல ஸ்டேட்டுக்கும் சென்டர் ரெண்டுக்குமே பவர் இருக்கு, அதனால concurrent list சொல்றோம். If it is repugnant to any provision, yes, I am coming to it, in repugnant to any such provision, right, of the earlier made law passed by the parliament or existing law made by the parliament, then the law so made by the legislature will be reserved for consideration to the assent of the president, which is prevailing in a particular state. அப்போ பாராளுமன்றத்திற்கு இயற்றப்பட்ட சட்டத்துக்கு முரணாக மாநில சட்டமன்றத்தில் ஏதாவது ஒன்று வந்து சட்டம் இயற்றப்பட்டு கன்கரண்ட் லிஸ்ட் பொறுத்த வரைக்கும் மட்டும்தான் இது, மற்ற லிஸ்ட்டுக்கு இது அப்ளை ஆகாது, டோன்ட் கன்ஃபியூஸ். கன்கரண்ட் லிஸ்ட்ல இருக்கக்கூடிய விஷயத்துக்கு ஏதாவது இயற்றப்பட்டிருந்ததுன்னா சட்டமன்றத்தால் இயற்றப்பட்ட சட்டம் பாராளுமன்றத்தால் ஏற்கனவே நடைமுறையில் அமுலில் உள்ள சட்டத்துக்கு முரண்பாடாக இருக்குமாயின் அந்த சட்டத்தின் செல்லுபடித்தன்மையை குறித்து ஜனாதிபதியினுடைய உத்தரவுக்கு ஒப்புதலுக்கு அனுப்பப்பட்டு ஜனாதிபதியினுடைய ஒப்புதல் அளித்து கன்சிடரேஷன் கொடுத்தாச்சு, அந்த சட்டம் ஸ்டேட் போர்ட்டலா செல்லும்னு சொல்லியாச்சுன்னா then the state made law will prevail. If president is not giving assent to that state made law, now the state made law will not prevail per se, it will be declared to be unconstitutional. அவ்வளவுதான். பிரசிடென்ட் அசென்ட் கொடுத்தாங்கன்னா that law can survive. அந்த சட்டம் உயிர் தெளிந்து வாழ்வதற்கும் இல்ல மரணத்து போவதற்குமான விதிமுறை ஒன்னே ஒண்ணுதான். ஜனாதிபதி ஒப்புதல் அளித்து விட்டார் அப்படின்னா சட்டமன்றத்தால் இயற்றப்பட்ட அந்த சட்டம் உயிர் தெளிந்து விடும். இல்ல ஜனாதிபதி ஒப்புதல் கொடுக்க மாட்டேங்கிறாங்க, இட் இஸ் வயலேட்டிவ்னு சொல்றாங்க அப்படின்னா, if it is not, president is not according the presidential assent, then the law will be, the state made law will be held to be unconstitutional. Then the state made law will be held amended suitably, or it may be repealed suitably, or it can be varied suitably. அப்ப எந்த பகுதி முரண்பாடா வருதோ அந்த பகுதியை எடுத்துட்டு state can make such amendments to amend the law so as to avoid the existing parliament made law, right? So this is how the power between article 246 we were talking about earlier, now that is once again envisaged under article 254. All right, so these are all the powers between union and state, right? All these aspects which we were discussing. ipo koda recent ah paatha epidemic diseases act, though it is a central law, state has been given power by the center in center state relationship in times of distress or in this type of pandemic situation. So the epidemic diseases act invoke panni thaan state government has passed or notified certain aspects of invoking emergency or what we say health emergency, right? So now subsequently also there is some provisions under the central law, namely the Disaster Management Act 2005, right? So the parliament had traced its legislative competence for passing of this Disaster Management Act from the older 1897 Epidemic Diseases Act. So அதுதான் the latest law. So in much of distress to where Supreme Court has also, the Honorable Supreme Court recently heavily coming down on the plight of the distress of the migrant laborers, you might have come across, right? The provisions are not clear. Now court has directed the parliament to make the provisions very clear. அப்போ என்ன பண்றாங்கன்னா, the parliament has derived power by saying that it has to trace the legislative competence under list number 3 entry number 23. லேபர் லாக்கு டைரக்டா ப்ரொவிஷன்ஸ் இல்ல இது கவர்மெண்ட்க்கு, அப்போ டிசாஸ்டர் மேனேஜ்மெண்ட்டுக்கு டைரக்டா லா வந்து இங்கேயும் இல்ல. So they have culled out the provision under concurrent list by way of social security, social insurance, employment, unemployment. அதுக்கு கீழே disaster management act notify பண்றாங்க. ஏன்னா disaster management is not a separate subject found as placed in any of the three lists as on today. Maybe parliament could amend suitably after this COVID-19 situation, taking into times of the crisis situation or needy, as we witnessed the state of events since March 2020, whatever, right? It is for the parliament now to amend the disaster or to amend the constitution so far as including the provisions, the salutary provisions of Disaster Management Act. There is an explicit entry must be made in so far making Disaster Management Act in terms of fitting into the concurrent list or the either of these lists under the 7th schedule. So time has ripened up for the parliament to think and act on this issue in a timely manner. Now coming on to the last aspect of this particular doctrines, there is kindly take down the doctrines for this particular doctrine of repugnancy. Landmark judgments only I am just giving. M. Karunanidhi versus Union of India, a case from Tamil Nadu, right? Prevention of Corruption Act, which we all know, it was now taken by this thing, right? Post with the Sarkaria Commission and all those things, right? M. Karunanidhi versus Union of India, AAR 1979, Supreme Court 898. This is one judgment. Then Raghubir versus State of Haryana. Raghubir versus State of Haryana. AIR 1981. Supreme Court 2037. The last doctrine is that we will be winding up. Other 2 minutes we will be winding up. The very last doctrine. Doctrine of occupied field. See, the occupied field doctrine is totally different doctrine, which I can say it refers to that there may not be any apparent conflict as we witnessed in the earlier colorable legislation or any other doctrine. There may not be any collusion, or there may not be any tug of war or conflict apparently between the provisions or entries of these 3 lists. Yet, though there may be some kind of a repugnancy, the reason being both the provisions are covered in the same field. ஒரே சப்ஜெக்ட் மேட்டர், ஆனா முரண்பாடா இல்ல, ஓவர்லாப். ஒன் செகண்ட் ஏற்கனவே சொன்ன மாதிரி தான், ரைட்? இட் இஸ் ஆல்ரெடி பீன் ஆக்குபைட் adequately taken care safely by one particular list. அதையே திருப்பியும் போய் once again you are making a parallel legislature. What is the purpose? It is once again encroaching into the province or dominion of the other legislature. It will clash with each other. So in case of these kind of occupied field, yes, doctrine of occupied field, FIELD. ஏற்கனவே ஒரு விஷயம், ஒரு சட்டம் குறித்து ஒரு சட்டம் இயற்றும் அதிகாரம் கொண்ட அமைப்பினால் சட்டம் செல்லுபடித்தக்க உள்ள சட்டம் இயற்றப்பட்டு நடைமுறையில் இருக்கும் பொழுது அதே விஷயம் குறித்த சட்டத்தை மீண்டும் ஒரு முறை இயற்றுவதற்கு அவசியம் இல்லை. இவ்வளவுதான். There is no point in making or drafting a same piece of law parallelly by illegally, or rather I can say by circumvently you are encroaching into the domain of the other legislature as such, and you are occupying incidentally, putting your shoes incidentally and encroaching into the house of the other legislative authority by making the law unnecessarily. So these are all certain doctrines which we could come out with the lawmaking powers as we refrain or confine ourselves to the center state relations. இது இல்லாம சென்டர் ஸ்டேட் ரிலேஷன்ஸ்ல மிச்ச ரிலேஷன்ஸ் எல்லாம் இருக்கும். Administrative relations, financial relations, that and all you can just look into it. One particular relationship is that 262 river water dispute வந்துச்சுன்னா சால்வ் பண்ணிக்கிறதுக்கு இன்டர்ஸ்டேட் ரிவர் வாட்டர் ட்ரைபுனல், 2 மாநிலம் நடுவுல ஒரு ஆத்து பிரச்சனை, 262 262 is the leading provision for resolving center state or interstate river water disputes. So these are all the certain provisions under constitution which would emphasize the federal nature or India as a union, as we all would say, India is a union of states, the union supremacy, all those things are hailed to be of the highest constitutional esteem. So the distribution of powers and the center state relation goes this way in the context of schedule number 7 of the constitution, articles 245 and all those provisions which we discussed will amply evident for having given a wide distribution of powers. We have drawn the significance